Buongiorno, friends, and welcome back to yet another fun episode of the Cup Duet Reviews, brought to you by Cup of Hemlock Theatre. I am your ginger host and co-artistic producer, Mackenzie, and I'm joined by my fellow co-artistic producer who usually wears plaid or flannel, but not today. Today he's wearing something completely different. It is the wonderful Ryan Borochovitz. Hello,
Wow,
Ryan.
what an intro. Usually like 50-50, I would say, but okay. Sure. Yes,
60
no,
40, 60-40.
if you know my wardrobe better than I do, sure. Yeah,
Okay.
no, hi, Mac. Hope you're doing well.
Hello.
I am wearing, for those not watching the screen on YouTube, I am wearing a shirt with little dachshunds on it. I've worn this on
Oh,
episodes before, little puppy dogs, because there was a
cute.
recurring motif in this show about a few mentions of dogs here and there. One of
Yes.
them that dogs bark at our title character at the street, which feels like a Richard III reference, but who knows?
Yes.
Anyway,
Yes.
sorry, we're getting way ahead of ourselves. Hi,
We
how
are.
are you?
We are.
What are
We
we
are.
talking about today?
Well, first, Ryan, what is in your cup?
Oh, yeah, I'm in a public space recording this right now, so I just have my external bottle of water to drink
Very
from.
good.
How about you? What's in your cup?
I have my tankard of Crystal Light.
Nice. All right, what are we
Indeed.
talking about today?
Well, we are talking about Roberto Zucco. Yes, Ryan got the program. By Bernard-Marie Koltès.
Koltès, I think.
Koltès, yeah. This is their final play that they wrote.
Mhm.
And it was translated by Martin Crimp and directed by Ted Witzel.
Mhm.
And it's running at Buddy's in Bad Times Theater until October the 5th. All right, Ryan, give us your classic Ryan Borochovitz plot summary, if you can. This is a very, I will preface all our conversation by saying this is a very avant-garde style show, I maybe want to say, where it doesn't quite have a straight through plot. It's a lot of vignettes.
Yeah, it's weird. I'm just going to come out the gate and say I think this is a weird show by design. I don't say that as a slight against it.
Yeah.
I maybe have some thoughts about the weirdness of it, but we'll get into those.
Yeah.
So Roberto Zucco is a play, the final play written by the playwright Bernard-Marie Koltès, less than a year, I believe, before he died of AIDS.
Correct.
In the late 1980s.
It was first performed posthumously, yeah.
Yes. So it is about let's call him our titular serial killer, Roberto Zucco, which
based
is
off a real killer.
Well, yes, a real killer named Roberto Zucco. So change one letter, completely different character.
It's a classic Law and Order, like ripped from the headlines.
Yes, it is. This is, yeah, I'm not familiar enough with the headlines that this is ripped from in the lobby.
I looked at a little bit of it on lunch break.
Yeah, in the lobby at Buddy's before we were admitted into the auditorium, they had like this kind of screen projector that was showing what looks like Italian news articles, but I don't read Italian, so I was unable to follow what they were trying to inform us about. But it's interesting to have that kind of journalistic context.
I don't think it was him. I don't think it was him because, but
you don't think he did the murders, or sorry?
No. I'm saying the video of him. I don't think it's him.
Oh, okay. Wait, like that was playing in the lobby.
Yes, because he dies in prison. He doesn't escape. He completes suicide. Like there's no major escape like that.
Interesting. Okay, sorry, I wasn't able to read any of those headlines, so I didn't even know that we were supposed to think for whom.
Wait, hold on. I take it back, Ryan. I'm just re-looking up images of him, and they actually did include a few images of him in that opening slideshow that we were watching. Not all of them are him, but some of them were.
Okay, fair. So it's a bit of a collage there. Yeah, the opening slideshow only existed in the lobby, so it's not part of the actual performance that needs to be taken in or understood, or it's not like they're trying very hard to preface the experience of the show with here's the real person and now here's the fictionalization, but it's something interesting that at least when we went on opening night was visible in the lobby, and I assume would be the case for the remaining performances as well. The play opens with him escaping from prison after he's been convicted for less than an hour for murdering his father. And it essentially follows him. I believe it's mostly set in Paris, despite the play itself, or the original crimes being done in both Italy and Paris, but the playwright himself is French. So, so Roberto, after escaping from prison, goes on a bit of a jaunt or a spree, you could say, of various crimes and killings and adventures and meeting a lot of kooky characters. So without getting too much into spoilers, in addition to the plot following Roberto as he goes on this jaunt of seemingly random crimes and adventures, you could say. We also follow the somewhat life story of a young lady whom he has an encounter with, a sexual encounter, and the fallout that she experiences from that encounter, what it means for her relationship with her family, her relationship with herself, and how she goes on to live her life. There's more that I could say about that, but I think for the sake of a non-spoiler summary, like you said, it's told in vignettes. It presents sort of a hop, a skip, and a jump through various encounters, various murders. There's a lot of pontificating about life and philosophy. The word evil is used many, many times throughout this play. So I think it, on one hand, presents itself as a bit of a ham-fisted meditation on the question of evil, but in other ways, I don't know if that's necessarily an apt way of summarizing. It's got a lot on its mind. And for the last play written by someone who was so near to death, I think it very much has the feel of, I got to get all my ideas out now because this might be my last chance.
Yes.
So yeah, that's a general plot summary. Before we go into spoiler town, what is your appraisal or general appraisal?
I mean, it's a fascinating play just because you're right. I kind of bobs and weeds, and it kind of just shows the ripple effects of these type of people in the world, like these killers, these enigmatic figures that kind of draw people in, and then kind of what effects do they have on like society, because it's not just the act of violence itself, it's everybody else around them that then get affected by the ripple effect of that violence. So it's very interesting to watch the show and see Roberto's kind of ripple effects that he has on these communities that he comes in contact with, even though he's kind of just this passing phantom almost that just kind of weaves his way through the world, and yet he's also at the same time wreaking havoc on them. So very, very interesting look at that. It's like as I said to you, it's kind of almost like an episode of Criminal Minds, but it's just the killer parts of the scenes. It has none of the profilers.
Well, yeah, the detective, light spoiler, is murdered pretty much instantly.
Yeah, off stage too.
Off stage, but I think that's a signal to the audience that you're not going to get the investigative perspective that is, and I don't know if that's actually true to life of Roberto Zucco's crimes. If he did kill a detective,
well, his father was a police officer.
Oh, so are those two crimes separated?
So he killed his father after he refused to lend him a car, and he also killed his mother as well.
Okay, wait.
Put their bodies in a bathtub.
Some of these should maybe Mac. I know you're talking about real life history that happened, but a lot of these things do instantiate themselves in the play, and I don't imagine this history is well known. So maybe let's save the list of murders for post spoiler.
Sure. I will say though, there is another police officer that he does kill.
Okay.
There are
yeah, I only started getting into this because I do think it's an interesting dramaturgical gesture. Like you said, it's not like Criminal Minds because the investigative perspective is extinguished instantly, and we follow the very different perspective anytime that we're not with Roberto himself. We're seeing it mostly through the eyes of the young lady he encounters or various other figures that you might meet in the streets of Little Chicago, as it's called.
Little Chicago.
Is that a real neighborhood in Paris? I've never heard that before.
I've never been to Paris. I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so
all I kept thinking about anytime we got to the red light district was like lovely ladies in Les Mis. That's the only thing I could think of. Was like prostitute at the docks.
If anyone is hoping for something like Les Mis, the tone of this is very different.
Very different. Very different. Jean Valjean does not strip.
No, but I guess it is about someone who exits a prison or a correctional facility and goes on to live their life in some ways, searching for meaning, maybe taking a young woman into his care in a very different kind of way.
It's Valjean if he doesn't find the bishop.
Yes. Ooh, that's good. Put that in the description somewhere.
There you go. So I mean, overall, it's a very interesting piece. I mean, once again, I didn't know too much about the case till today. Like I went into the show almost completely blind, except for I was like, okay, Italian murders, and this plays a bit avant-garde from what I read about the playwright. So I was like, okay, that's all I need to know. Sounds interesting. I like true crime. Count me in.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't love it. I'm not going to lie.
Okay.
I think it's fascinating.
Is it the material?
Okay. I think this is a very strong production of this play. So yeah, I would say it's the material that I kind of struggle with. Yeah, 100%.
Because I would agree with that. I would agree with that. The piece is a bit too avant-garde. Like,
Well,
Ryan, if you
yeah,
know me, which you do, I
yeah,
was never a big fan of very avant-gardian, don't really know the plot style theater. That's not my cup of tea.
yeah, and it often is my cup of tea, but I don't
It
think
is.
this is a,
Yeah.
to my view, I don't think this is the best example of that kind of thing. I do hats off to the cast and the crew. Like, all of the actors understood the assignment, that there is a very kind of stilted, mechanical way of delivering these lines because they're all written in such a heightened, semi or borderline absurd way that, doesn't quite abandon realism entirely, but it's so not the way that real people speak. I think, yeah, the cast did a really admirable job handling all of that.
Yes.
I sorry, just like jotted down some random notes on my phone about this show that sort of just sum up my thoughts about the kind of this playwright. And like, it's, yeah, I'm not at all surprised that Martin Crimp, who wrote the translation for this, was gravitated towards a play like this, because this, to me, feels like it could almost be an document for the in your face movement, in a way that Fred Jarry's Ubu Roi was kind of an document for the surrealist movement in the around the turn of the 20th century. This kind of feels like Crimp grabbing onto something that was a bit of a precursor to, I think, much better plays that some of these later contemporaries would go on to write. Yeah, theater of the absurd feels like a touchstone that I think is being applied here, but I don't think it's quite got the grasp of what made a lot of those plays so good. If you had told me that this was like a worse sort of forgotten play by one of the kind of moderately medium known absurdist playwrights like Jean Genet or Eugene Ionesco, not quite Beckett, if you had told me this was one of their lesser known plays, I would have believed you and I would understand why it was one of the lesser known ones. But I think, to me, this is a playwright who wants to be Jean Genet, would settle for being John Osborne, but spiritually feels a lot closer to Tommy Wiseau, I'm sorry to say. And I don't mean that actually
put that on a poster.
Oh yeah, I don't mean that as disparagingly as it probably sounds, because like Tommy Wiseau, for all of his faults, is a distinct artistic vision. He has, there is something charming about it. It charms generations of, so bad it's good film people to kind of find that there's something compelling. He is telling a story in a way that doesn't feel human, but that kind of is what makes it interesting. And I think that's a lot of the energy, why I say it's kind of a spiritual comparison, that I would say. I'm not at all surprised that our director, Ted Witzel, has trained and or worked in Germany, because this feels like a play that would be very at home on German stages. And yeah, but more than anything, I think, and not just because of the subject matter, but the big comparison that I keep coming back to is, remember Cabaret of Murder, which we saw at the Fringe Festival this year?
Yes.
This one, yes, it is about a serial killer, so that's why the content wise, but it kind of doesn't feel that different than the plays that were presented in that piece that were written by the Virginia Tech shooter, just in terms of how bombastic and violent and self-glorifying they are. And that's the thing, like, I don't know enough about Bernard-Marie Koltès. I'm sure he wasn't a violent person, probably, in his life. I'm sure he was an angry person, and understandably so, given the times and circumstances he was living through. But so I'm not saying this comparison to be like, oh, this feels like it was written by a serial killer, but it kind of has that same rough around the edges. I think there is some trouble brewing behind the thoughts that are animating this piece. So yeah, that's the best I could do for general appraisal. Those are just the thoughts that I was hammering it on my phone while I was taking the train home last night. Yeah. If any of that sounds interesting, I would encourage people to see this, because I think it is a wild ride. It's very much part and parcel with every, I guess, few years, Buddies tries to reinvent itself in terms of, under new artistic leaderships, what does its relationship to queerness and queer art and queer aesthetics mean today? Because this is a piece that, rightfully so, isn't necessarily queer in a sexuality sense as we would understand it, beyond the fact that the playwright himself was most likely queer, I assume, or possibly he was certainly dying of AIDS. I don't know if that's confirmed.
He passed away of AIDS.
Yeah, well, but not everyone who did was themselves queer, so
True.
I don't want to make that assumption. I'm stopping myself before I make that assumption. But yeah, but the content of the show itself isn't. But there's that really great article. I don't know if you've read it by Paul Halferty, Queer and Now, I think it's called, from like 2006.
No.
So a lot of it's out of date, but it's about sort of the changing mandates of buddies over the years and
Okay.
how the touchstone signifier of queer has taken on different meanings at different times under different artistic directors and how they've embraced that idea. And I I feel like a lot has and hasn't changed since 2006 when that's written, because I think we are still very much at this development where queerness exists as a radical aesthetic principle that doesn't necessarily have to be coupled with the idea of queer sexualities or gender expression. And I don't know. Yeah, I think this piece certainly fits the strangeness of a kind of radical politics that's trying to put through. And I do like how ambiguous it allows itself to be, that there really are no easy answers to how to approach this piece. I was reading a few articles that were published earlier this week in which Ted Witzel was interviewed about this piece. And he did say that when he first encountered it as a student, his response was like, what the fuck did I just read? This is so weird. Why would anyone write anything like this? So I think the feeling of being a little unmoored and not really sure how best to get my teeth into this piece is the point, and I do respect it for that. As we're trying to figure out what this next chapter of Buddy's history under Witzel's artistic directorship is going to look like, I think this is a very interesting statement of purpose or intent that I'll be very curious to see what the next few years for this institution look like. Yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying I have complicated thoughts, but maybe now's the time to get spoilery into more specifics.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'll just say before we go, I agree with a lot of what you've said, where, I think the material itself is very difficult to get around. And I think Ted Witzel did a very good job of trying his best to get his grasp on this piece that I think really is kind of meant to bounce around inside your brain, kind of like we are supposed to be inside Roberto's brain, where nothing is quite, none of the synapses are quite connecting, but they're kind of misfiring at each other. So at some points they kind of mispass along the way. So it's one of those things there where like the production value of this is great.
Oh,
The
yeah.
acting is superb. I thought everybody did a great job on that front. I mean, we also should note that this show was held for 30 minutes because their ASM was injured and they had to bring in a ringer to kind of fill in the role. And they did a great job. They did a superb job covering that, taking care of that, because there's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of big set pieces that have to move around.
Moving set pieces, yes.
Literally. So it's a lot to handle, and there's a lot of quick changes and people in and out of certain costumes and moving things around the right way. And so it was just very, very well done. And so, I mean, even though the material, as Ryan and both said, it's a bit wonky and a bit out there, we would still recommend seeing this just because the value of what Buddies has produced is really good. So I would just say that.
Sure. Everybody came to play for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And so this show runs till October the 5th, and we highly recommend you go on over to Buddies and Bad Times Theater, and then you can go onto their website and buy a ticket. It's going to be a hot ticket, I think, because I think the audience was very enthusiastic. It's got some big names in the cast as well that I'm sure will draw some attention to it as too. And just I said, and as I said, just for the production value alone, it's a solid piece.
Yeah.
All right, Ryan, shall we put up our broken payphone?
Ding. Broken telephone is an interesting image for describing this piece, because it seems to want to communicate something, but what that exactly that it is communicating gets filtered through a lot of processes, and we do have a literal broken payphone as a major piece of the set. So well done. Spoilers. What do you want to talk about first?
Well, I would say let's give some cast shout outs to people who, deserve some praise, because they did a great job tackling this piece. I mean, I think you and I can both start off by talking about our titular Roberto, played by Jacob Enman, who I saw.
Amen. Apologies for pronouncing your name wrong for everyone.
And so I saw Jacob in Cock, that Talkers Free did last spring. And he was terrific in that. I mean, did not like his character, which that's okay. But he and Michael Toronto.
Did you like this character more? Did you like this character more?
They're about the same. I mean, I was less frustrated with like Roberto than I
Mhm.
was with his character in Cock, where that character
Interesting.
I was like the indecision that character has, because like you've read Cock, right?
No, I have not.
Oh, that's a good play to read, Ryan. That's a good one.
Okay, I'll check it out.
Yeah, 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 yeah. All about the destruction of a relationship. So solid fun.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
throttles, that too. So there's that. Anyway, but yes, Jacob was terrific in that. And he was great in this as well. I mean, once again, he starts the show off by literally escaping, and the audience was chuckling because you have the prison guards talking on one end, and you can just quietly see him doing that classic prisoner crawl along the wall type
Yeah.
thing. Like it was just enough cartoony that it was funny. But then in that
Mhm.
very next scene, after he knocks down the wall and he goes
Mhm.
after his mom, that was a very intense bit of violence, and he did a great job with the fight choreography. I mean, he spits out a tooth in one scene,
Oh my god,
and
yeah, that image.
it was just so wonderfully vague in the role. Like,
Yeah.
basically, they talk about him being almost like a phantom, like this person who just moves through. And I mean, like one of the things, Roberto Sacco, one of his names was the killer with the eyes of ice. That was one of
Yeah,
his
that checks
names.
out in Jacob's
Yeah.
performance. Yeah.
Right? So I feel that very much fits. And I mean, even like in his posters we see behind us here in the background, it's just those eyes are just so cold and
Yeah.
aloof. I mean, I mean, he's just once again, he's just moving through people like a steam engine, just plowing people over and not flinching at all. It's just, but at the same time, he's also processing. You can see his mind
Yeah.
breaking and processing at the same time.
He's got the steely gaze and the shaky hands, and those two
Yes.
things are very interesting as a contrast. That on one hand, he has this blank expression that you have to
Yeah.
kind of project your own meaning. His crime seems so aimless and incomprehensible,
Yeah.
but then every time his hands shake and very subtle but effective and
Mhm.
perceptible in Jacob's performance, it shows that there is a human behind the monster,
Yeah.
that it's not just someone who, like you said, steamrolls through and destroys
Mhm.
lives, that it is taking a toll on him. And it's unclear if he even knows why he's doing it, or if
Right.
this is just the position he's put himself in.
Yes.
I think a thought that occurred to me about what this piece might be trying to do, one of the many things it's trying to do, is examine the mythology around not just serial killers altogether, but individual serial killers or mass murderers in this way,
Right.
and really make us think that at what point does a person become a more of a symbol, and when they become a symbol, do they cease to be a person? And
Right.
the way that his name is used throughout this piece, the way people whisper it and talk about it and wonder what he could be, I think part of this show, not all of it, but certainly a significant portion of it seems to be meditating on that idea of what happens when we abstract someone away from their humanity while they are still very much humans themselves. And I think Jacob sold the humanity that is a necessity to make that idea shine through.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly it. I mean, like the way, like basically, like yeah, like you're right. Like the way they kind of don't say his name, but then say his name, it creates that aura of the zodiac basically. Like it's like creating that mythology about who he is, even though really he's just a broken man who's on a murder spree, but yet he's turned into this
Yeah.
boogeyman
Or even a
almost.
folk hero to some. Like
A
it's
folk hero to some. I mean,
yeah.
I mean the fact that the police are too afraid to get close to him when he's holding people hostage.
I do love the way that law enforcement is portrayed in this piece. It's
Very
like a real return to the silent movie Keystone Cops, like where they're just
yes,
completely ineffectual and
Looney
don't know what
Tunes
they're
level
doing.
cops. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's yeah, and a lot of this is kind of critiquing systemic violence and
Hmm.
structures, and so having the police kind of be portrayed as buffoons, I think, sort
Hmm.
of reveals a lot of where we're kind of going here in order that we're not necessarily celebrating the crimes
Hmm.
of a completely destructive person like Roberto, but we are showing that Law and Order, big scare quotes, is not the antidote to him like he would be in an episode of Criminal Minds, as you were
Yeah.
so perceptive to compare it to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have another thought about that, but I don't want to derail you while you were making cast
Yeah.
shout outs or talking about Jacob specifically.
No, I mean, I've said a lot about Jacob where, like I said, like he's terrific. I mean, even the fact that, at the very end, he strips, he bears it, and he literally throws himself off the balcony like Javert off the bridge.
Wow, so much lame is in this. I didn't even realize.
So much, so much. It's one of those things there where it's just so, like, once again, you're watching this moment and just the vulnerability that you have to have as an actor to be willing to bear it all to the audience. Like there is no hiding there. I mean, the
Mhm.
show does a great job of doing it very tastefully and
Yes,
not
the shadows and
the
contrasts and
shadows and the
lighting.
bars and the
Yeah,
lighting.
you can see the outline of some of his junk, but don't.
Yes.
If that's the kind of thing that would put you off, you don't really get like a
Yeah.
good eyeful of it. And when he
Yes.
comes out for his curtain
This isn't
call,
Equus.
almost immediately. Yes, when he comes out for his curtain call, it's immediately after he is wearing a bathrobe, and it looks
Yes.
like a cozy one.
It does. It does.
Yes.
All right. So Ryan, who else gets your cast shout out for this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of
You had a
strong
few
players
people.
in this. Yeah, I want to say Kwaku Otri is an actor who I always find very fascinating. He played, so everyone aside from Roberto has a bit of an ensemble track
Mhm.
and where they play a whole bunch of different characters. But Kwaku, he has such a strong stage presence. He plays the older brother to our female co-protagonist. He plays the detective that gets murdered. He plays a guy at a bar that Roberto gets into a fight with.
Yeah.
And, you know, he just commands the stage at every moment. He's such a compelling stage presence, and he brings what I think is a lot of the humor in some of these kind of
Yes.
pieces. He just, there's always a bit of like a semi-ironic, not quite like a wink and a nudge, because
The
I think
hostage scene is where he really shines with his comedy.
yes. Oh yeah, for sure. When he and the others are kind of at the payphone making their
Yeah.
sort of kind of
Commentary.
banter.
Yeah.
There, like every one of his lines kind of had me chuckling a bit.
Yes.
I have more thoughts about that hostage scene, but let's focus on Cass for now. So yeah, I think he was excellent. Daniel McIver also is clearly having a very big career moment right now. That last year, I think like 3 of his plays appeared on Toronto stages, 2 of them at Factory alone. He was in the cast of The Inheritance, which also perhaps explores ideas around AIDS a lot more directly than this play does. But yeah, he's, I'm very happy for him. He's one of our, greatest Canadian playwrights. And I think, I'm really happy to see him making more of an acting comeback in these types of roles. He also plays a bit of a kind of hodgepodge of characters. There's this older gentleman at the train station, which is a really just fascinating scene.
Yeah, there's a lot in that scene.
Yeah, there's a lot of like, that's if we're looking for where the queer content might exist in this piece. I think that is.
I was definitely picking up those vibes.
Yeah, so he like puts his hand on his thigh. It's not subtle and talks about various, favors that could be done perhaps with each other. But that scene had me on the edge of my seat because you expect that this is, of course, the kind of person that Roberto's going to kill, and he doesn't. It's almost just a surprisingly tender moment in this play that just feels like it's a fill in the blanks until we get into the next murder. And every time a new character is introduced, especially one who seems ill-fitting in the environment, you kind of expect that's where we're going to go next. But yeah, McIver sold that scene really well. Jacob played off of him very well. And yeah, it was a kind of a master class in just building tension, but also deflating that tension in a way that provides a little glimmer of comfort in this piece. It's hard to describe, but it was very effective for me. So yeah, and he also then had great roles like the prison guards, the pimp.
I was going to say the prison guard was my favorite.
Yeah. Well, again, it's just, so the way law enforcement is portrayed in this piece, they're all just such buffoons. Oh, and my favorite, I assume it's a different kind of law enforcement character, but especially when our female co-protagonist is talking to the police to try to help them find Roberto. That scene of all of his sort of like cop witticisms, but they're all completely witlessisms, because it's a lot like Inspector Clouseau in a way. And just some of the funniest lines in that scene. Okay, I've shouted out a few. Who else do you want to kind of give a hat tip to?
I'm gonna give a shout out to Fiona Hyatt.
Hyatt, perhaps. Apologies. Hyatt, perhaps. Apologies
I was
with
gonna
all
say
pronunciations.
Hyatt, who played the mother. She also played like kind of the lead streetwalker, Lady of the Night character. She also played the Porsche lady, so she's behind us there in that wonderful green costume. And she always had these kind of maternal roles that she was playing, like even
Mhm.
playing the mother character to the drunk husband
Yeah.
of Bird Girl,
Mhm.
an
Yeah,
older
Bird Girl, good
sister.
name. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, like she always was. Every time she played a mother, it was a different mother. Like it
Mhm.
wasn't the
Yeah.
same maternal figure over and over again. Like Horse Lady is very different from Mother, who's very different from irate wife
Yeah.
character, who's also very different from like maternal streetwalker character.
Mhm. Yeah, no, true.
So I thought she did a very good job differentiating these roles that could very much kind of blend together when you're playing that kind of track.
Mhm.
Her scene on the bench, this particular scene here, after Roberto shot her son, and she's talking about the fact that he was mine and he was my prick.
Mhm.
That yes, he made my life miserable taking him to all these practices, but he was mine. And the fact that they're gonna wash his blood away in the grass,
Mhm.
in the next few days, and that'll be that. Like, it's a very visceral scene, but at the same time, as you said, it's a very interesting dynamic she created with Jacob in this scene where is it Stockholm syndrome? Is she kind of Bonnie and Clyding this, where she is the bored stay-at-home
Ye
housewife and she's kind of
ye
looking for
Yeah.
adventure? Like, where is she
It's so
going with this?
unclear. Yeah, because trying to ascribe normal human motives to any of the
Yes.
characters in this feels like a
Yeah.
fool's errand. I think everything you said sounds as like a good a possibility as any, but the fact that we're all so unclear,
Yeah.
not a slight against the performer itself, or even necessarily against the writing. It's just that this is a
Yeah.
play that doesn't care if any
Mhm.
answers or explanations or even well-grounded theories towards
Yes.
explanations are provided for why
Yes.
people behave the way they do. They just do. And I don't know, maybe some people have other compelling theories that if maybe a more comb through of the script
Yeah.
could come up with better answers.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just so bizarre.
Yes. Yes. And I mean, and then we got to give, of course, shout outs to our final two cast members who we haven't spoken about yet. And that's Oyen Odeleje.
Olideo, apologies
Oladeo,
for
we
the pronunciation.
apologize.
Yes, you were excellent in Three Sisters also.
Yes.
Yes, continue.
Well,
And
good.
Samantha
Playing a
Brown as
sister
well.
role here.
Yes, yes. Ooh, I didn't even think
Yeah.
of that. That's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Very different sister, but very dynamic. I mean, once again, their monologue after their younger sister, Bird Girl, has been lost and basically sold herself into prostitution, and the breakdown she has on stage about that is
Mhm.
heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But at the same time, her, bumbling cop is very
Yeah.
funny.
Oh, and bantered with MacIver so
Yeah.
well. Like the
Yes.
two of them, I would watch them do like an Abbott and Costello routine
Right?
if yeah.
Right? And then it's also the switch she does as the sex worker, where before the sister is sold into sex work, she's very pleasant and kind to her, saying, "Oh, don't worry, some women are twigs that you can break
Mhm.
into someone who are more full figured, and you should be happy with your full figure." And then the minute she's sold,
Yeah.
the coldness comes back, and it's
Yeah.
get to work.
And yet there's also an elegance to her in those
Yes.
roles that
Yeah.
she's kind of classy at it. She's clearly been doing it for a while.
Yeah.
She's jaded, but not in an angry way. It's just like nothing phases her. She's seen it
Correct.
all. Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah. Really well
Exactly.
done.
Yeah. And then of course we have fellow Yorkie, Samantha Brown, who played Bird Girl in Young Boy, as well as a few other roles.
Yeah.
Very
Also, keep in
interesting.
mind, sorry, before you get into it, all of the names of these characters are not listed in the program. I wrote them on a
Oh,
list here,
you
just
made them
trying to
up.
cover. Yeah, so Bird Girl, yeah, she has the funny monologue about how like, oh, they just keep calling me different kinds of birds, and she like lists
Yes.
a good 20 different types of birds there. And again, this is what I mean by this kind of like completely unhuman, non-naturalistic dialogue. Like nobody would talk that way. They would name two birds and move on. But yes, sorry, continue.
Yeah, I mean, she has such a interesting, like, a lot of her roles are reactionary roles where she is in the scene, but she's more reacting to them, like whether or not it's her first scene with older sister, where she is playing quiet, or then, there's a scene where her brother is calling her to see you next Tuesday, and she's eating Cheerios at the table. Just fascinating to watch her react to this world and
Yeah.
have her own internal energy about her because she's got plans. I mean, she is very true that she wants to go find Roberto again.
Yeah.
But once again, she's a very insulated character. She's not as outward as some of these other characters that are played around her, which can be very difficult to do, to be actively in the scene but not be overly reactive in the moment.
Mhm.
Like you have to play still, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. This is a play that has almost two protagonists. I keep sort of referring to her as a co-protagonist, and
Yes.
yet they're both very passive.
Yes.
Which is interesting that like other people kind of decide the bird girl's life is going to be. She has a kind of specific goal that she does want to see Roberto again, wants to find him, but she doesn't really call any of her own shots. It's her brother sells her into the life of sex work because he's happy to rid himself of the role of protector that having a virginal little sister means. As soon as she no longer fits that role, he's able to cut ties and make money in the process.
Yeah.
And it's like you kind of wonder what would have, and also he's always hovering, or the sister's always hovering over her. Like we get very few views of what choices she actually makes when left to her own devices. It seems like when she's actually most in control is the one or two scenes that she shares with Roberto,
Yes.
where he becomes the passive recipient to her. Or of her lust, feels like maybe the wrong word for it, but of her desire for him, or for what they can offer to each other. Perhaps there's a kinship there, that they're both lost souls who don't know what they're doing and feel controlled by their families, and he's done something, even if she doesn't know what, he's done something to try to liberate himself from that, and maybe she's attracted to the potential of something like that, even if she doesn't know the circumstances.
Right.
Yeah, it's an interesting characterization, and she performed it very well. But it's just trying to get a handle on what any of these characters are. I keep I want to pontificate on what can we make sense of, but it just feels like it's spinning a lot of gears, and I don't know where any of it leads.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the whole point of the play. We're meant to be just spinning.
Yeah, speaking of spinning.
Let's talk about, what I would say is really one of the standout parts of this whole production, which is Michelle Tracy's set and costume design. I mean, the minute that wall came down, I was like,
bam. Yeah.
And the dust from that, I was like, whoa, okay. This is not, a regular indie production. This is,
well, it's definitely not indie, but
no, but you know what I mean, where it's like this is a regional,
they have production value.
They have production
making
value.
Walls fall down.
Exactly.
I would love to know what the stage direction as written is for that, because I would be surprised if it is just the whole wall falls down. Like that's a choice in the writing, but I feel like it's probably more something like he climbs through the window, or he smashes the window, or he kind of knocks down the door or something. But to whatever it was, to visualize it in that way is just it is knocking down the doors very literally, and like this is the kind of show you're watching, and it is such a departure from realism that once again affirms that check your expectations about how people should behave or what kind of things should happen at the door.
Yeah. And I mean, like even like Logan Cracknell, another fellow Yorkie.
They're everywhere.
Yeah, they are. We spread near and far and wide. His lighting design was so interesting. Like it was so atmospheric.
Yeah.
But yet not overpowering. Like it really just let you breathe in this world a bit more and feel just that ambiance of this kind of dark, seedy, I don't know what the word is, murky world that we're living in.
Neo-noir is a word that's been used a lot in the marketing for this piece, and I think that's the lighting is a big part of how we sell that idea, because I think the script as it exists on the page feels almost too comical to really occupy that zone, even if that was something that the playwright was maybe intending as a stylistic choice or a generic flourish. But the lighting and the atmosphere it creates is a big part of what gives that noir vibe, very much so. Expressionistic.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I didn't realize the show had a composer, but we have Dasha Plett as the composer and sound designer, but I didn't realize that there was music specifically composed for this.
Yeah, I'm trying to pick out bits of the music. I feel like a lot of it was very kind of light underscoring. I'm trying. Do you remember anything that was prominent about it?
Like I remember more the sound design of the show, where like you had the audio recordings, and then you had kind of the soundscape created there. So
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And then of
Mhm.
course we had Ted directing the piece, which we've
Yeah.
already discussed, really.
Yeah, just Anita Anatoli's fight and intimacy direction was very top notch
Yes.
with this. Yeah, the fight, yeah, all the fight scenes were quite brutal. You talked about the one earlier where he spits out the tooth right after
Right.
getting hit, which maybe that part itself isn't part
Yeah.
of the fight direction, but you know, when you see that image, like you feel the weight of the fighting and the violence that happened here. It sells it so perfectly well. And yeah, there's I think I've used the word tenderness already to describe some of the smaller moments in this piece, but I think, yeah, the intimacy is challenging, I guess, just
Mhm.
based on what we're dealing with here. Do we ever find out exactly how young Bird Girl is supposed to be? I think
It
15 maybe
I was
was
going to
said
say
once, but
15, 16, something like that.
yeah.
Like yeah, no, they say 15.
Okay, they
The
did say
brother
15
says
months, but
15
I
at
didn't
one point.
remember if it was specifically in reference to how old she is now or if it was just like a general statement about young age, perhaps. But yeah, like there's something very liberatory for her, but it
Hmm.
feels very wrong just knowing how young she is. She takes control, but I don't think she really is thinking through the implications of what this is going to mean for the rest of her life, what exactly she's signing herself up for. So, as well handled as I think the intimacy scenes all very much were, it's a bit of a tonal whiplash in a way that some things are handled in ways that you could even describe as somewhat beautiful in a little way, but then you kind of feel icky about thinking that it was
Yes.
well handled in that way, if that makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is again, it's just such a strange piece, everything
It's
about it.
very strange. Yeah. And
And
I mean, once again, I think Samantha and Jacob did a great job
yes.
handling that and not making it too sexual where it's like this feels really exploitative and icky.
Mhm.
Like yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic to watch that. And once again, this is why having intimacy coordinators are so important on shows because
Mhm.
they can really help hone that type of thing there with the cast. And so, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
Ryan, you keep alluding to the hostage scene.
Ugh.
So before we roll out, is there some thoughts you want to give on that particular scene? Because you seem to have kept
It's
alluding to
yeah,
it.
well, because yeah, it's because one, and it's also like I think for the most part the whole cast is present. Yeah, they're all present in that scene. So I think every time we were talking about one of the actors, I kept coming back to that. I hated that scene so much.
Why?
Um, it uh, it felt like an SNL sketch that they like the kind of bad SNL sketch that they would just sort of try to hide in the last half hour of the episode after most sensible people have stopped watching.
Mm,
It was just cringy. Like the actors sold it well in like their very
yes.
good tongue in cheek way, but just like as a piece of playwriting, I was like, oh my god, what am I even watching?
Mhm.
It's it just yeah, I don't know. It clearly it realizes it's supposed to be funny and plays it for the comedy, which is why when he does shoot the child at the end, it
Mhm.
does feel like a big whoa. But I could also because it was so absurd and silly and
Mhm.
over the top, I was anticipating that we were going to get a big moment of whiplash like that. I wasn't surprised when it happened. And I think so for me, that didn't really work. I don't know.
Once again, it's the material, not the cast. They
Oh
didn't.
yes, 100. The cast did a
Yeah.
great job with this, and the fact that they committed so wholeheartedly to this preposterous tone of it all, and they sold the jokes well. But yeah, it's just to me, there's enough weird borderline comical stuff throughout the play that it's not even that this scene feels out of place in the whole, but I think to me that one scene puts a very fine point in why I don't feel like the play as a whole works for me.
Sure.
And it's just like if you need one scene that kind of draws in all of its flaws into a single convergence point, it's kind of that one for me. Yeah, why? What did you think of it?
I agree with you. I mean, like the gunshot made me jump. I was on the fence. I'm like, are they going to kill the kid? Or are they not going to kill the kid? This is going back and forth here. This is very interesting. I mean, the mother doesn't seem that, hysterical about the situation. So,
Yeah,
like,
she's ready to die. Like it's, and
yeah,
I'm not against that as a choice, but because there was such a humorous tone, and
yes,
even none of the characters were all that worried about what's going to happen. There's just like no stakes. And then when they do kill the kid, like it's there. we haven't been built up an atmosphere where that means anything. And even after the fact, like there's no grief from the mother. She's sort of, to say there's no grief is probably a mischaracterization.
She does have grief in this scene, but once again, she's, I don't know if it's Stockholm or if it's just repressed emotions because she's
so
in shock.
tepid. Like there's no emotional weight to it. And that, for something that I think is supposed to jar you out of the comedy like that, I expect there should be more weight. Everything should feel different after that gun fires. And it doesn't. It's still kind of just a silly moving forward after. I don't know. That's me.
It's an interesting one. I mean, once again, the scene itself, I was laughing until the very end when it does that 180. So I'm like, is that the playwright's plan that you lulls into a false sense of, where like false sense of security, and then, it escalates again?
We've already seen multiple murders by this point. Just the fact that it happens to be a child, like, I don't ever have the sense watching this that like anyone is safe. That I do feel like anybody could get killed at any point. So yeah, I think the comedy is trying to create a sense that, haha, it's all fun and games until somebody gets shot, but then it still sort of felt like fun and games even after that. I don't know. Like it didn't do it for me. That would be like a funny scene in an SNL context until the shooting, obviously. But like everything about the lines feels right at home there.
Yeah, like once again, the hostage negotiation, kind of the way they staged it with the very kind of bumbly Officer Krupke-esque officer, who's just kind of,
the cops are hilarious. Our trio of bystanders, all of whom we've shout out as actors, they do such a good job. The jokes all come from them. But maybe if they were more startled in the aftermath of the kid, like show us that, we're not joking around anymore. That could have maybe done something. But I don't even recall if they even had lines after that, or if the scene just ended. Do you remember?
I can't remember.
Yeah, the fact that we don't remember, I think, kind of speaks
to... It ends
to
pretty abruptly.
And I think it wants to be jarring that way, but then kind of just keeps doing its own thing after that. I don't know. That was the one scene that I would say I really didn't like. Everything else was fascinating, even if I didn't love it.
I mean, I agree. Do you have any other thoughts before we wrap out, Ryan?
I like the use of scene titles that we had.
That was interesting.
And I correct me if I'm wrong, but about halfway through the play, we stopped seeing them, right? Even though the scenes kept moving.
Which is why I was on the fence, because I'm like, either commit to the bit or don't commit to the bit.
I think I liked what they did with it, because there is something about how sort of strange the story is, its lack of narrative coherence in a certain way, that I do get the sense that we are, how to put this, like the framework of this sort of Brechtian title of this is what you're going to see in the scene. Like, I forget what the title of the scene where he kills his mother is, but it was something pretty close to like he kills his mother or some of that. So you watch that scene knowing what's going to happen. So then you're not surprised when it does happen. And I think there is an early establishment of comfort through that convention, that we know that this is history. It's already happened, that there's nothing we could do to save it. We just need to kind of watch it play out, and maybe we'll get some clarity on why things happen by being given that greater context. So then having them disappear halfway through, I think, is a good gesture towards this commitment to unmooring, I guess is a word I would use, but showing the audience that the narrative scaffolding has collapsed in upon itself, that it's, the structure has receded, and as things just get stranger and stranger as the things go on, that lack of structure, I think, suits the material better, but I only realize how much better it suits it by seeing the opposite in those earlier scenes. I don't know if I'm quite right about that, or I certainly wouldn't claim that's what they were going for, but to me, that's kind of what it communicated, and I do respect some version of that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, for me, like, I was like, I like them. I always enjoy when you get like the title of something, and it's like, okay, how does this connect to the scene? Like, where are we going? Just the title Brotherly Love before we get the See You Next Tuesday sequence. I was like, where are we going with this? Because this is either going to go really incestuous, creepy, or
Mhm.
really heartwarming. Like, where are we going with this? I mean, I like the setup because then it makes you kind of anxious in an interesting way, just kind of see where this story is going to go. But
Yeah.
yeah, I did miss them after a while because it's kind of like, oh, I was enjoying getting to kind of
Yeah, and I would say the
see what's
missing
going
them
on
is
with
kind
them.
of yeah, and the fact that you miss them, I think, is part of the point that we
Yeah,
do feel like there is an absence, a lack, the perhaps comfort or discomfort that they were able to provide is missing, and we're
yeah,
kind of just left in purgatory. And
hmm,
a lot of this back half of this play feels purgatorial, as in where is
true.
this even going? What's going to happen?
Yeah,
He goes to prison again and instantly escapes again. It's just cycles repeating over and over again. Eventually, you just
yes,
have to fly too close to the sun and fall to get any kind of
yeah,
structure or mythic grandeur to any of this. But yeah, it's I don't know. It was just something that I noticed that I
yeah.
had thoughts about. One last thing that I kind of maybe want to talk about here is
Let's do it.
in the program note. There's an interesting paragraph about Slavoj Žižek, the philosopher and social commentator's distinction between subjective violence and objective violence. And here, I'll just read it aloud because I think it's a good preamble to what I want to talk about here. That Slavoj Žižek distinguishes between subjective violence, parentheses, appalling eruptions of violence perpetrated by an individual, such as rape, murder, terrorism, and objective violence, structural or systemic violence that often goes unnoticed and unremarked on, the violence of frictionless capitalism, the nuclear family, the police state. In Roberto Zucco, Koltès renders his world's objective violence horrifying and Zucco's subjective violence heroic. End quote.
Hmm.
That I think is interesting because looking at the material, I understand where that thought comes from, but I don't see that playing out here. It's not so much that,
Yeah.
from where I'm sitting, that it's not so much that the objective violence is portrayed as horrifying. The objective violence is portrayed as comical, nonsensical, absurd.
Hmm.
The fact that every time we encounter police officers, they're total doofuses. They very seldom pose a serious threat as they're portrayed in this. And as a result, I don't know, like they try to be threatening, but they're just
Hmm.
so ineffectual that they don't even fail dangerously. And so I don't know if I see the horror of the objective violence. And then the flip side of that is that Roberto's subjective violence being portrayed as heroic. I don't see that either. I used the term folk hero to describe him earlier because I think the play sees him that way. But he is a rebel without a cause. He just does things and he's not even sure why he does them. And I wouldn't call that as fitting into my idea of how we culturally interface with heroic figures, how we prop people up. I think there's a deconstruction in the mythology of this type of killer, as I discussed earlier. But to me, it's not so much the inflationary rhetoric of mythology turns someone into a hero. It's a bit of a deflationary or deconstructive view towards once you mythologize someone, do they even cease to be themselves, or do they cease to be themselves in this way? And to me, yeah, heroic isn't the word that came to mind for that. I don't know. Do you have thoughts about
Definitely
any of
not
this?
heroic. Like,
And not
I
not
think,
because he's villainous, even, but just because that it doesn't revel in what he
mhm,
does, or if he had some sort of grand philosophy or ideals, or
right.
this is a play that I think really wants to be on some level. I'm throwing out so many like bizarre or obscure, semi-obscure like theater history references here, but like this is a play that wants to be The Robbers by Friedrich Schiller, but came at the end of a career as opposed to the beginning of a career. The Robbers is an interesting Sturm und Drang flashpoint of there's better things coming from this playwright as soon as he figures out his anger. But this
Right.
as the kind of capstone on a career right before death. I guess we're faced with someone who never got a chance to kind of grapple that and embrace the classicism that would maybe
Hmm.
come with a more measured, structured approach to the complicated ideas that he's trying to express. I
Hmm.
don't know. Sorry, I'm going on all kinds of weird tangents. What do you have to say?
I mean, I never read the note, so this is the
Okay,
first time
yeah.
I'm hearing it. But I mean,
Yeah.
like, yeah, I agree. Like, I don't think that like the show revels in the violence. Like, yes, it is violent. Like that strangulation scene of the mother. does go on. Like, it's not a quick death. Like they hold that scene for a while. But it's not Hannibal Lecter killing the guards so he can then eat their face, you know? Like it's not that type of violence. It's violence with for like Roberto's case, a purpose. He is doing it because it is part of a, you know, plan. It's like, you know, why does he kill the inspector? Well, it's not because he wants to, it's because he wants his gun. That's what he wants.
Yeah.
And he gets
it's just
it done.
it's very matter of fact. It's
just very matter of fact. It's like, yes, it's a spree because it's random people after the mother, but it's not gleefully relishing in it. You know, it's not, as I said, it's not like Hannibal Lecter where it's like, ooh, this is kind of titillating and fun to see how he's going to get away from these horrible police officers. That's Officer Pembury, damn it. Talk to him.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's that type of thing there where, like, there's a bit of glee when you watch because you know what's going to happen when those officers bring the food into the cage with him, because in Silence of the Lambs, I mean, with Lecter, you know,
gotcha.
where it's like you're just waiting for that trap to go off, and Hannibal's going to go get him, or, you know, Chilton at the end. I'm having a friend for dinner. It's like,
yeah. Well, but Hannibal Lecter is such a interesting comparison, because that's someone who everything is calculated. Murder is an art. He knows exactly why he does it, and he loves doing it. This is none of those things. This
exactly.
Is
Roberto's not that.
He bumps back and forth and stumbles between situations. Some of them premeditated, others just completely happenstantial.
Like, I would say, like, Hannibal Lecter's a heat-seeking missile in murder. Roberto is a pinball ricocheting around the machine and hitting things and causing reactions to that until finally the ball drops out of the machine at the end.
Well said. Good comparison to the late great Hannibal Lecter.
Well, let's see how many people catch that reference.
I'm sure people will. Hopefully, if people watch this like months from now, they'll have forgotten what that was all about.
True. There you go. All right. Any other fun topics, John, or shall we?
I feel like we
tell people to go on out and see this very interesting piece.
Yeah, check it out. Even if you don't love it, you'll definitely be thinking about it. Like, I'm not stopping thinking about this anytime soon.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I was talking with some of our colleagues before the show, and I was saying how I'd recently finished up some shows at the Stratford Festival, and I said there were shows that were fine in the moment, but didn't stick with you.
Yeah.
Yet there are other shows that have images or situations or performances that really just latch onto you. And I would say this is a piece that, you know, can I remember a lot of the plot pieces? No. But there are images and moments that just stick. Like, you know, Daniel and Oyen being the police officer duo together, or, you know, the wall coming down.
Yeah.
Jacob jumping off the balcony at the end of the show. The fight choreography where he spits the tooth out. Like, there are many moments that are sticking with me and are holding. And I go, that's the sign of a production that's worth seeing.
Yeah, it's
even if you don't
sticky.
Get everything.
This is a sticky show.
Yes, it is. It's a dusty, sticky show.
And your mileage will vary if that makes it good, but I don't think anyone would deny that it's fascinating.
Yes, exactly. And on that lovely note, we will say once again, this show, Roberto Zucco, runs at Buddies in Bad Times Theater until October the 5th. Go on over to their website. It's linked below in the video to get your tickets. And Ryan, before we go, give us that classic Ryan Borochovitz send-off we all know and love.
Yeah, no point in trying to find and follow me, but if you like me and my theater thoughts, many of them live here on the Cup of Hemlock Theatre on YouTube, Cup of Hemlock Theatre podcast on all the podcast places. You're consuming this in one of those places, at COH Theater on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. How about you, Mac? Where can people find and follow you?
Follow me at Mackenzie Horner on all social media platforms. Follow my musical theater antics over on Before the Downbeat, a musical podcast. We actually, as of today, our recording day, we have just started releasing our new season of season 6. So just stay on in for that. Who knows? Ryan may be popping up on an episode in the near future.
Am I? Have we discussed this?
Well, I mean, we've talked about doing Gallivant in season 2 at some point.
Yes, at some point we should do that. That's fun.
Yes. Yes, because people did like that miniseries that we did there. So
Nice.
that is on our to-do list for sure. But other than that, everybody, we'll see you all in our next episode. We have quite a few shows lined up for you over the next little bit. So definitely stay tuned to check that out. And until then, everybody, stay healthy, stay safe. We will see you.